So you need to appropriate the right amount of resource and the right technique. You need to be an active skeptic in order to be successful at this and to take advantage. Like your goal is to ride the momentum of these forces versus being buried by the momentum of these forces.
So let's talk about this executive oversight to keep things going. What are some of the principles of kind of really good innovation leadership to keep, and I'm talking about C-suite or CEO level leadership to keep a project like this on track?
Yeah, so we kind of talk about three key things, and the first is a chapter called "Continue, Kill, Pivot, or Confusion," and it's about the high stakes moments where you're making, you're down the path on some concept here. And so you're making a decision relative to, I kill? Do I pivot? Do I continue? Do I scale? But what typically happens is there's actually confusion that falls out of that. And it's because we don't have good hygiene about how we run that meeting and the job to be done at that meeting. It's not an audit. It's not anything other than here's what we've learned, here's where we're at. What do we think the next best move is relative to this proposition? And declaring and defining that out loud, repeat it, make sure that there's no confusion about the decision. So that is about what that chapter is about. But
are you allowed to defer a decision?
Yes, if it has good hygiene and specific next steps to what we want is more information on this point, and everything, right? Yeah. And so that's a nuance of kind of continue, which is like, go get me this point, answer this question, test this concept out as a deferral point and everything.
So I want to step back for a second because obviously the topic of innovation and the topic of R&D has been around for a very, very long time in many forms. It feels to me more important now. And I want to see, feel free to agree or disagree, but it feels to me...
That's kind of the premise of the book to some degree is in a monumental manner. And it's not driven just by AI. We have three mega forces.
They're change everywhere.
Yeah, we think that there are three mega forces that are really going to drive this hyper digital era. One is technology, AI in particular. The second is the aging of our population. And the third is the competition for capital driven by the indebtedness and the committed spend of our countries. And if you put those three mega forces, each one a significant cyclone, but together it's going to create this vortex of both opportunity and disruption. So I frame, named, and claimed that problem, which we call the hyper digital era, which is going to make the change 10x. And the premise, my belief is that you are going to see companies that are fundamentally engineered for 10 to 100x levels of productivity than a similar company, well-run company is today. And I think that is happening now. And that set of mega forces are tied together with a fuse. And that fuse is capital that's at play to invest in those companies with aggressive playbooks to take down the incumbents. And so that is why I agree and magnify your observation, which is this is a dramatically more important conversation now and going forward.
Those of us in the startup world have been waiting for what feels like the inevitable solo unicorn, right? That small team or solo individual whose productivity is so amplified that they build that $1 billion plus business, right? And I think writ large, I think there's a lot of that disruption coming. But what strikes me is that it's not just that this is important because there's more challengers. It's important because the future is actually murkier. You can see these forces, but the impact of the forces Like we don't know. Nobody can actually tell you what OpenAI, DeepSeek, Anthropic, or anyone else are going to be capable of in 12 months. Not even those teams. Nobody knows what the downstream second, third, fourth order impacts of those are going to be. So, as corporate leaders, it strikes me that part of this conversation is about setting your organization up to prepare for whatever the uncertain future might be, rather than planning for what you believe it will be. Does that ring true?
Yeah, absolutely. So the last recommendation in the book is to be an active skeptic. So active meaning you can't just watch this stuff happening, but skeptic meaning don't just believe it either. Like you actually have to test these things out. So you need to appropriate the right amount of resource and the right technique. You need to be an active skeptic in order to be successful at this and to take advantage. Like your goal is to ride the momentum of these forces versus being buried by the momentum of these forces.
I love that. And I think that's a really interesting kind of metaphor to end this segment on. We want to be able to ride those. So kind of to close out this little piece of the podcast, one question for you. And it's maybe a hard question, maybe a really simple one. What do I as a leader do first if I have listened to this and I am convicted?
That leadership.
There it is.
Here's what I would do first is come up with 3 to 5 really difficult problems that either your customer faces or your operating model faces. Put a name and write out 1 paragraph on those 3 really hard problems. That's the start.